So thank you everybody for attending. This is basically sponsored by National Building Expert and Construction Management Inspection, which actually is my company's. Um, Ask the Building Expert is basically a series of webinars that we're giving. And look at the title, it's Ask the Building Expert. So if you have any questions as we go through, please ask away and I'll be happy to answer them for you. If I don't know the answer, I promise I'll do some research and then get back to you. So we're talking about hurricane ties. If you look at the picture on the right, that's me with my hurricane preparedness outfit. Actually, that's my outfit that I wear when I go on a swing stage hanging 40 stories above a building. And I have my harness and fall protection certification and all that. So the information I'm giving you today is coming from a known expert. It's actually uh, provided to help building owners, associations, condo associations, property managers, contractors, real estate developers, insurance agents, and the list goes on and on. I was actually in San Francisco several years ago inspecting the Millennium Tower that's sinking, and that was a lot of fun. I think it's under repair now. I don't know. I haven't been keeping track. And then I had somebody take a photo of me on a job site where I was a federal construction inspector. And when you're the federal inspector, you have to wear full PPE. And why don't I have my mask on in this photo? Well, because the photo was taken before the pandemic, so I was still legal. So let's go right into hurricane ties. Don't be blown away. And I'm gonna share some interesting information. What hurricane ties? Well, if you look at the picture of a house, this house is built in the 50s and it did not have hurricane ties because in the 50s and in the 60s and the 70s and even in the 80s, hurricane ties was not required. Okay, although I'm going to clarify that the building code required hurricane ties in the 80s, but it was not enforced until uh, later years. And I'll talk more about that later. If you live in a house or you're selling a house, if you're a realtor and it doesn't have hurricane ties, make sure that the buyers know that there isn't any, because that could be a problem for them. What hurricane ties? Well, the dog is asking, hey, I got this lovely house that is very expensive, but I want to know if there's hurricane ties, because if there's a hurricane, heavy winds, I don't want my roof to blow away. Then, if that's the case, I'm going to come into the master's house and the owner's house and live there. Now, um, hurricane season actually started, and it starts now if you're in the Pacific. And there may be attendees on this webinar who aren't from Hawaii. Maybe they're from California or New York or wherever. But hurricane season and in the Pacific starts May 15th, which is basically started already, and continues on through November 30th. And that's called the Pacific hurricane season. Oh, but you live in Georgia? Okay. So you're part of the Atlantic hurricane season, which runs from June 1st all the way through November 30th. And the areas that would be included in this Atlantic hurricane area would be the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean Sea. If you're in the Pacific, it's basically the Pacific Ocean. Okay. Now, what what is like a hurricane? Well, a hurricane is considered when the wind reaches 74 miles per hour, uh, and up. And why 74 rather than 75? I don't know. I didn't bother to find out. And there are also ratings from 1 to 5. which are called categories. So the categories 1 and 2 aren't that bad, but the categories 4 and 5 are basically the worst. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what a hurricane is. And there's actually, in addition to hurricanes, there's tornadoes, cyclones, and those kind of things. But basically, we're talking about buildings or houses that are on land. Okay. Oh, by the way, if you're a sailor or you're going out on the open ocean, you want to be sure that you're aware of the hurricane and uh, cyclone and storm seasons, no matter where you sail, whether it's Pacific Ocean, Atlantic, or wherever. What are hurricane ties? Well, hurricane ties, they're commonly known as hurricane ties, hurricane clips, rafter ties, connectors, connections, or basically hurricane protection. And here's a photo of a hurricane tie or a rafter tie. If you look at the top section, that's a roof rafter. And if you look at the bottom where there's 5 nails there, that's attached to um, a header or a top plate of the structure of the house. So the top plate is actually the wall, the top wall of a house, and the rafter is your roof connection. So this tie actually connects the house to the roof. And I'll talk more about that throughout the webinar. And in in the early days, there were no requirements for hurricane tie. And then when the building code came out, um, there was a requirement, but the requirement was that you didn't have to have the hurricane tie attached to every single rafter. And then later the code changed to require connection at every single rafter. So I kind of like this photo because it represents what the uh, tie actually looks like, the metal connector. And as you can see, it's angled because it has to be designed to accommodate the way that the roof is designed and connected with the house wall. Okay, here's some more metal connectors. Some people call it a hurricane tie. It could be, but it's actually a connector to connect portions of the framing of the house together, like floor to floor or floor to a beam or a floor to a post or something like that. Now, here's the kind of legal terminology, and the legal terminology is called continuous load path. And what is a continuous load path? Basically, it's a path that connects all the load features of a house or building. So you have foundation, your house foundation tied to the ground. You have your house tied to the foundation. And when I say house, that's the house walls. Then you have the second floor tied to the first floor if your house is 2 stories. And then you have the roof tied to the house wall. So basically, these are the um, considerations and the terminology of a continuous load path. If you have your house walls tied to your roof, that's a continuous load path. If you have your foundation tied to the house wall and the house wall tied to the roof, then that's continuous load path, which is a plural. Okay, so basically, the idea is tying everything together so that when there's heavy wind or there's a hurricane, the house roof doesn't blow off, and then the whole house doesn't blow off also. So here's a nice image showing the house foundation, and you could see the bottom section where of the house where it's tied to connected to the house foundation. And then if you look at the top, you have the house wall, the framing wall, tied and connected to your roof rafters. Okay, so I like this photo because it basically represents the, you take the house walls off your siding and you can look inside the house framing. So if you look at a house that's under construction, this is hopefully what you see. And because if you look at a house that's already built, you can't see the components inside the house unless you have X-ray vision, which I don't yet, but maybe in 5 years I'll have that feature. Um, so if you look closely and if you see the concrete, and I have this cursor arrow here, if you're watching, if you see the concrete here and then this horizontal piece of lumber here, that's called a sill plate. That goes directly on top of your concrete slab. But then there's a bolt here called anchor bolts. And what it is before they pour the concrete slab, they usually put these anchor bolts in, and then they drill a hole in this piece of lumber here and it fits right over the anchor. The other way is if you don't have embedded in the concrete slab your anchors there, the contractor has to drill a hole where your bolts are going to be and then epoxy the bolt in and secure it. So once this is done, and then there's also straps here and a bigger one on this side here. So these connect with the concrete slab also. So once you have all this in place, the framing goes up. So if there's a hurricane and the wind blows, it's your wall is not going to move. It's going to be stable because it's connected to the ground basically at the slab. Likewise, on the top here, you got these straps here, and it's connecting each rafter. So in case of heavy wind, your roof doesn't blow off because it's connected to your house wall here. And that's what's called a continuous load path. Okay, interesting, huh? Here's another exploded version, but except it's for a two-story house. So as you can see, there's one story, then the second story, and the first floor is connected to the second floor. And then the second floor wall is connected to your roof framing here. Okay, so basically you have a condition where every single component of the house is connected together. Your foundation sits on the ground. Your first floor wall is connected and attached to the foundation. Then your second floor is attached to your first floor. And then your roof is attached to your second floor. So if you have heavy wind, this house is not going to move. It's basically going to stay in place. Now, imagine if you did not have these connections here at your roof. So you have your foundation connected to your first floor connected to your second floor, but there was no connection, no hurricane ties at your roof. Guess what? When you have heavy wind, your roof is going to blow off, but your house will still be there. Okay. Now, let's talk about the building code. Okay, there's actually, in a residential construction, there's two building codes that are in place. One is the IBC, International Building Code, and the other is the IRC, International Residential Code. If you're talking about a commercial structure, then you use the International Building Code rather than the residential code. If you're talking about or building a single family house, then both the IBC and the IRC apply. Now, here's some information. The code required hurricane ties in the 1980s, okay, in the 1980s. But in Hawaii, that code was not enforced until, say, 1994. So therefore, houses, although the building code was in place in the 1980s, say 1989, there were still houses built in 1990, 91, 92, 93, 94, where they didn't follow the building code because there was no enforcement. So what does that all mean? Basically, what that means is that houses built prior to 1994 do not have hurricane ties unless the owner or the contractor decided he wanted to install it. So I can tell you that I've inspected probably maybe 50,000 houses, single family houses, and the homes that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and some even the 90s did not have any hurricane ties or hurricane protection. Okay, so that's just a heads up. The other thing is that there could be houses built in 1998 that do not have hurricane ties. Why? Because the contractor did not put them in, although it was a code requirement. Or they may have put one rafter and then skip 6 rafters and put another one in. You know, that's not as good as every single rafter. Building code requirements, the today's plans require hurricane ties. Any plan that was made after 1994 should have the hurricane tie requirement shown on the plans. So that's just something to be aware of. Today's code, of course, requires it. So every new home built today has to have the hurricane ties. Let's talk about hurricane protection retrofit. Now, what do you do in a situation where your house does not have any hurricane ties? What can you do? Well, you can do nothing, or you can decide to be proactive and have a company come in and install these hurricane protection devices for you. Now, the thing to be very careful of is that a general contractor may say, yeah, I can do it. But if they have not done a lot of these and they're not specialists, they basically may not know what they're doing. And if you look at the photo here, this is of a lanai enclosure, and they installed this strap over their roof rafter or ceiling joist, and it looks kind of hokey, yeah, but basically there's things wrong with this insulation, and one of it is if you look at the edge where that wood is cut, the metal is right too close to the edge of the wood, so that's not the proper placement of that strap anyway. But it's funny because if you look at the roof, it's a metal roof. It's like a corrugated metal roof, and there's no hurricane protection in that. So even if your framing was intact, if there's heavy wind, your whole roof is going to blow off anyway. So, and I thought this picture was interesting anyway, but there's only a few companies that specialize in hurricane protection retrofit. So be sure you hire the right company and ask them a bunch of questions if you do decide to do a retrofit. Also, while we're talking about the retrofit, a good contractor can come in and install hurricane ties after the fact. Now, it's a lot harder to do it after the fact, but if you do your house and you're protected, but what kind of windows do you have? Because your windows can blow out. If you have a garage, your garage door can also blow out. And then if you have a carport, well, how are you going to tie that down? So if you're doing a retrofit, make sure that you consider all these different factors. If you just want to spend the money on the house and forget about the garage, carport, patio, and anything else, then that would be up to you. But ask questions of the contractor. Okay, the hurricane tie or hurricane protection retrofit is basically the house and roof tied to the ground. Okay, and your roof tied to a house. I've seen retrofits where they install these anchor bolts to your house wall and roof, and there's chains that metal chains that you can stretch out and then connect it to these metal posts in your ground. And basically, you're chaining your whole house and roof to the ground perimeter around your house. And then there's other methods where they do a retrofit by installing brand new hurricane ties to your existing house. Some case studies here. There were actually 2 hurricanes in Hawaii that I experienced, and this is my personal stories here. So there was Hurricane Eva in November 1982, and the wind was 50 to 90 miles per hour and higher, and it amounted to $250 million worth of damage. Now, $250 million may not seem that much, but remember, this is in 1982. Okay, so if you equate that to today's dollars, that's a lot of money. And then there was another hurricane, Hurricane Iniki, which happened almost like 10 years later in September 1992. And the wind gusts were up to 225 miles per hour. And 225 miles per hour, that's considered a Category 5 hurricane. That's like huge. And that was amounted to $3 billion worth of damage. Now, I was living in Kaneohe in a townhouse at the time in 1982. And man, that hurricane was pretty scary, though. It was just pouring rain, and the rain wasn't too bad, but the wind was just howling, and it was scary with howling winds. And the wind didn't just howl for 10 minutes. It was hours and hours during that whole hurricane episode event. But anyway, what happened is the day after, I got a call from my mom, who's living in Kailua, that my cousin's house roof had blown off, and my cousin needed help. So I was living in Kaneohe. My cousin was also living in Kaneohe. So I said, okay, I'll go off and go and help her. I don't know what help she needs, but so in my mind, when my mom called me, I thought maybe a corner of the roof blew off, and they needed me to tell the neighbors or the carpenters or whatever how to fix it. Okay, so usually when people tell you, oh, the roof blew off, yeah, okay, maybe the shingles blew off and the roof's still there. It's like exaggeration kind of thing. But so I got ready, and I said, I'm going to go help my cousin. So I got ready. I went to my garage, and I didn't realize this. There was this huge tree that was in the this courtyard outside of my fence that had fallen over because of the hurricane, and it blocked my car. So I couldn't get my car out because the tree was so big. I tried to move it. I couldn't move it. I found like a hacksaw. I hacked some branches, which took me 20 minutes, and the branch was probably only an inch thick in diameter. And I'm going, forget it. This isn't going to work. So I called my cousin, who sent somebody over to pick me up. So we got to her house, and um, I was kind of shocked because her house was standing there, but she didn't have a roof. Her entire roof had blown off, and the roof blew off far. So what happened was the wind carried her roof, and it took it 2 blocks away, and it landed on Kamehameha Highway in the middle of the road, because the morning paper had a photo of that lone roof sitting in the middle of the road, and that was my cousin's house. So it was a disaster. So being that the house was determined unfixable, and everything had to be hauled out. So I go in the kitchen, and there was a 27 cubic inch side by side refrigerator that was upside down, and I don't know how the wind carried this heavy refrigerator and turned it upside down, but it was like, I was kind of surprised when I opened the door, and I going, well, wait a minute, this whole thing got turned over. And then we started hauling out everything we could, and there was a baby crib, my niece's baby crib, that got put together in the room, and we tried to bring it out, but it wouldn't fit through the door. So my cousin said, this is an expensive crib, what do we do? I said, I got a way to take it out. So I asked my cousin, hey, where's your chainsaw? He goes, oh yeah, I have it in the back. So I fired up the chainsaw. I started cutting where the door was, cutting open the wall. And my cousin said, what are you doing? You're wrecking the house. I go, oh, we got to take the crib out, right? And then she goes, oh, and my cousin was renting the house. So she said, oh, well, we're going to have to pay for the damages. I go, no, the house is a total loss. And so no worries, So if the owner has insurance, the insurance will pay for all this. If hopefully he has hurricane protection insurance or hurricane insurance. So anyway, that was a story on that. I was like pretty surprised, but it took us probably 2 days to move everything out of the house. And good thing there was another relative's house in Kaneohe where we moved all the stuff to. So that's the story. If you look at these photos here, these are actually photos of Hawaii where there's heavy devastation and damage. Now this is a photo here of a townhouse complex on Kauai, and if you look closely, the building is still there. The first and second floor is still there, but the roof got blown off. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there was no hurricane tie connecting the roof to the house wall. Okay, and what happens if you're not aware that the wind doesn't, like rain, normal rain, it just comes down from the sky in a vertical direction. When it's a hurricane, the wind actually causes the rain to blow sideways, and there's what's called an uplift factor. So the heavy wind will hit the wall of the house, and then it'll get pushed upwards, and that's called wind uplift. And when it does that, can you imagine heavy wind blowing against your house, but instead of blowing against your house wall, it's blowing up towards your house roof. And that's the uplift condition is what causes the roofs to actually blow away, because the wind is actually uh, the pressure is lifting up the roof and blowing upwards, and there's so much wind at high velocity, it basically separates the roof from the house and just starts tearing the roof apart, or in my cousin's case, carrying the whole roof away. I got another photo. Okay, here's a photo here of a house on the mainland. And if you if you take a look at it closely, you see that the roof is still there, but the house separated from the foundation. So what happened here is that the house was not connected to properly to the foundation, and um, the wind blew so hard that the house got separated from the foundation. Now, I'm not sure how this truck got under the house, but I guess it seems that there was a combination of the wind so strong, blowing the truck, and at the same time lifting up the house from the foundation, and the truck got wedged under the house. And then, as you can see, portions of the siding is all warped and um, separated. So you can imagine if the wind kept blowing, then the house basically wouldn't have any siding left. The door would have ripped off, the siding would have come off, probably the roof would have got also blown off. What happens too is when there's heavy wind pressure, the wind actually would go through your windows and doors. So that's another protection too, and that's the reason why in on the mainland they have these tornadoes and people have to, block up their windows and their doors. And we don't have tornadoes in Hawaii necessarily, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Let's talk about some case studies. Recently, and I believe it was sometime last year, up in Wilhelmina Rise, there was a house where the the roof was separating from the house, and this is a photo of the roof actually um, that blew off the house. Okay, and what happened was I guess the homeowner had called the fire department, and what normally happens is the news people are listening to the broadcasts of uh, the police, ambulance, and the fire department. Anyway, they're listening to emergency broadcasts so they can get to the scene. So what happened was the news reporter went to the house to take a look, and while he was there and while the camera was filming, the roof was like going up and down, and then just in a split second, the entire roof actually blew off the house, and they have it on video. And I couldn't play the video on this PowerPoint, but I took screenshots of the video so you can see um, how devastating the wind was. And if you're scared, here's the warning: if you're scared of looking at photos of a house roof being blown off, then maybe close your eyes or turn away from the screen for a few seconds while I show you the next slide, which has the roof blowing off. Actually, the video is more impactful, but if you look at these photos in the sequence of the roof blowing off, you can see what 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 happened. And um, there was complaints. I know in the news had put it on Facebook, and there were complaints like, oh well, the contractor didn't install hurricane ties, and it was a bad contractor and all that. But people are easily led to jumping to conclusions because they didn't realize that this house was an older house. So normally an older house you don't have hurricane ties, and that's the reason why the roof blew off. But okay, are you ready? If you're scared or you're gonna have heart condition, then don't look at the photo. Okay, here we go. So these are screenshots I took of the actual video. If you look at the left, the house roof is like, the actual video showed that portion of the house going up and down. As you can see, it doesn't look too good. And then the middle photo, already you can see the house roof is like ready to blow off. And the last photo shows the whole roof blowing off the house. Now, all this happened in a matter of like maybe 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah. So it took me a while to take the screenshots because it happened so fast. I had to take multiple shots and to get the right image I wanted to portray to you. But this is an actual house where the roof blew off, and even when I look at it, and I've been inspecting houses for over 40 years and seen a lot of different things, but I was still kind of amazed when I saw the video of this house roof being blown off, and it's kind of a sight to see. And fortunately, the people have insurance that can pay for rebuilding. By the way, this incident, the contractor was there, and I'm not sure what work he did, but I know he was doing work to help um, protect the roof. Normally, they would put heavy tarps down and plyboard and nail it so that uh, water can't get in. And then when the rain subsides, then the contractor goes in and does his repair, whatever he needs to repair. You don't want water to get into the house and damage the contents of the house, furniture, and all that kind of stuff. So basically, that's the sequence. And that about wraps up the hurricane protection webinar that I'm giving to you today. Uh, don't be blown away. Well, I hope you got educated and learned some things. And right now, I would like to open it up for Q&A. But before I do that, I want to let you know that there's upcoming webinars in this Ask the Building Expert series. And the next 2 webinars, I'll be talking about roofing and premises liability. The premises liability is about avoid the lawsuits. And I'm going to talk about conditions that are unsafe that could cause people to trip and fall, slip and fall, or get hurt in some fashion. And the roofing one, I'm talking about different designs of the roof, different roofing material. I'm talking about warranties, the types of warranties, and other things like that. But if you have any interesting topics that you want covered, please reach out by email or phone, and we'll add that to the list, and we'll consider that to be a future webinar topic if it's of interest. And all of these topics that we're talking about in these webinars are actually the top rated or requested webinars for the general public and those in the industry. So after taking different surveys, we put together the most important ones that we feel are people would be interested in. Okay, so at this time, I'd like you to ask questions if you have any, and we'll open it up for the Q&A. So Martin, are you there?
Yes, Lance, I'm here.
Okay, do we have any Q&A from any of our attendees, either chat on the Q&A function, or somebody wants to ask a question live?
I'm looking at our chat. No questions in there, and nobody's raised their hands. You must have done such a good job. But I guess we've gotten some email-in questions from people that had registered. I'm not sure if they're here, but I can give you some of those until we see somebody raise their hands or enter something in the chat. How about if I give you that to start?
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds real good.
Okay, here's the first question that was asked was, my house foundation is concrete. How are my house walls connected to the concrete slab? Did you answer that?
The house is concrete slab. How are the walls connected to concrete? Okay, so let's take the sequence. So the concrete slab is built, and then the wall framing starts going in. Okay, so the wall system has to be connected to the concrete slab. So for instance, let me take the liberty of trying to find that photo on my PowerPoint here. Okay, so if you look at the image here, there's a concrete slab, and then there's that piece of wood called a sill plate that's connected to the concrete slab. So this is how your house wall gets connected to the concrete by this sill plate here, and there's anchor bolts, and there's these connectors. So without this, your whole house would not be connected to a concrete slab, and therefore could be blown away or racked. Okay, racking is when the wind blows or there's an earthquake, and then your house gets shifted from the foundation. Now, these hurricane protection devices not only help during a hurricane, but it actually helps during an earthquake too. Because when there's a shake, rattle, and roll of the earth, your house is moving around. And if your house is not connected properly, continuous load path, then things could start falling apart and separating. So it's not only for the hurricane, it's for any kind of movement. Lateral forces could be wind, it could be the ground moving, shifting, and that kind of thing. So now there's also the older houses do not have a concrete slab, and it's called raised construction and post and pier. And you have these concrete blocks called tofu blocks that your 4x4 sit on. The older houses, there's no connection, nothing connecting the tofu blocks to your 4x4 posts. It's just like using the weight of the house to sit on the blocks. And then through the construction terminology and later years, they came up with these concrete blocks that have these metal connectors already built in, and then that's how you connect your 4x4 house posts to those blocks. So the older homes are susceptible to getting blown away because they don't have these features. So hopefully that answered that question. Any other ones?
Lance, yeah, there's a few more here. That's a good answer. I realize now we were earthquake protected too, huh, with all that stuff.
Right.
Okay, the next question is, have you seen any retrofit work that was not done properly?
Yeah, I've seen a whole bunch. And that's why you have to, I mean, just because you hire a contractor and he's going to come in and do the retrofit doesn't mean that he did it properly. So I've seen situations where they installed the hurricane ties, but they didn't install it correctly in the right location. Let me see if I can find a photo here. Yeah, I don't have the right photo to show you, but let me use this one. Okay, if you look at this photo, this is a photo of inside a house, because you can see the roof rafter here. Okay, but just imagine that the house is already built and you don't have room in the attic to install these, so you have to install it from the exterior, from the outside. So what happens is, on the outside there's siding, right? So you have to find the rafter, and the rafter is visible, so this part here, but then this here, you don't know what's on the inside. So I've seen contractors install the hurricane tie and they're not nailing it to this header here, this top plate. They have maybe a trim or a little space there, so they're nailing into a trim, and you have to nail it into a solid structural lumber, which is a 2x4 or size larger. You can't nail it to a 1x4 trim piece or anything like that. So in this particular instance, yes, the tie was not installed in the correct location, and then when there's a hurricane, there's no protection because there's no solid connection. There's no proper continuous load path there. So the contractor who's doing the work needs to know exactly where they're going to nail these ties to, because if you're nailing it in to trim, or it's hollow behind it, that's not going to do anything. Basically, you'd be wasting your money. Yeah. So if you're going to do a retrofit, make sure that the contractor identifies exactly where they're going to nail these connectors to, and it has to be solid. So that's just some tidbit tips for you.
Oh, thank you, Lance. We got a couple more here. This one might be just like a follow-up to that earlier one. It says, do you know of any situation where there was a failure of the ties which resulted in a lawsuit?
Okay, so I actually was a lead expert witness of a major lawsuit. It was the biggest class action lawsuit in Hawaii. And I'm not going to mention the name of the development, but it was Ocean Point out in Ewa. And there were thousands of homes that were affected, townhomes and single family, where it was proven that the hurricane ties were defective, and some of it was installed improperly, but there was a settlement done. So basically, in a settlement of a construction defect litigation case, both sides kind of agree that they're not going to admit that there was a problem, basically, and that's part of the settlement. So anyway, I can tell you that it was a problem. The metal content was not up to code, and there was premature rusting, which would result in premature failure. So in other words, if there was heavy wind, the component itself could be too thin or too corroded. And if it gets too corroded, it's not going to work as it was properly intended to work for. So that was an issue. So it was the hurricane ties, but it was also the anchor bolts. You know, when you connect your concrete slab that's connected to your house foundation, those anchor bolts were starting to fail and get corroded, and that wasn't good. So there was a big class action lawsuit that was settled. So yes, in this case, there was construction defect attributed to this hurricane tie and anchor bolt material. So if you want to know more about it, just go on a search engine and type in Hawaii hurricane tie failure, or hurricane tie litigation in Hawaii or something, and then you'll see it. By the way, the same kind of term in this lawsuit, same kind of cause is going on with other developments in Eva and Mililani and maybe some other areas, but I'm not part of that lawsuit as an expert witness. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. We have another one.
Yeah. Final two that we got mailed in. Yeah. I heard that you can get some savings on your insurance if your home has hurricane ties. Is that true?
Yeah, let me talk about that. Some insurance companies, when you try to get homeowners insurance, let's say you're buying a house and you're trying to get homeowners insurance, some companies will ask, well, all of them will ask, does the house have hurricane ties? And if it doesn't, then they're going, well, we don't want to insure you, so you get declined. Then other companies ask if there is, and if you say no, then they will still cover you, but you have to search out for those insurance companies that would do that. Now, if you already own a house and you want to do a retrofit, you can get discounts in your insurance, but you have to provide the invoices from the company that did it, and got to make sure whether that company does give you the discount or not. Yeah, if they don't, you can still install it, but you won't get any savings. But it's up to you to check with your own insurance company to see if they do offer the discount. Now, it kind of makes sense for the insurance company to offer the discount, right? Because then it's less of a problem for them when there's some hurricane damage. By the way, there's also, in addition to homeowners, there's a hurricane relief fund in Hawaii, and that was made as a result of the hurricanes we had and the substantial damage that it caused. But if you really look into the hurricane, it's called the Hurricane Relief Fund. The state rated some of the money for some other stuff. So basically, the bottom line on that is if we had a major hurricane and we're overdue for one by years, it's not if it's going to come, it's when. So Hawaii is overdue for a hurricane, but if a hurricane came and it was similar to Eva, Iniki, or other big ones like on the mainland, the Hurricane Relief Fund wouldn't have enough money to pay for everybody. So the state doesn't want you to know this, but that's an actual fact. It's almost like if the state of Hawaii today had to fix all the buildings that are state owned, and including hospitals, public facilities, rental housing, rental buildings, the educational buildings like University of Hawaii and the community college buildings and all that. If the state had to fix all those buildings today, they don't have the money. They're broke. So just be aware of that. So if there was a major hurricane, don't count on the state hurricane relief fund to pay money to fix your house, because the money's not there. So sorry for the bad news, but that's what it is. We have one last question.
Yep, that's one more on this list, and thanks for the info there on the Hurricane Relief Fund. Yeah, the last one I have that we had emailed in was, are hurricane ties required by code if I am adding a new addition to my old house?
Aha, okay. Here's where it gets tricky. You ask your contractor that, and they'll say no, because, and this is a scenario where you already have a house and then you're building an addition. So your contractor will say, no, it's not required because we're only building a new addition. We're not touching the old house, okay? But that's a fallacy. That's a myth, because if you, well, let me take that back. If you don't get a permit, then basically it doesn't apply, except that you're required to get a building permit by law. And when you submit the plans to get a building permit, they're going to go, oh, this is an addition to your existing house. How is it going to be tied in to your existing house? If there's a hurricane, it has to be protected so that this new addition doesn't blow away. Okay, and then they can make you retrofit your entire house. So in other words, they can say, oh, if you're building the addition, and I'm talking about DPP, the building department, they can say, because you're building an addition, we want your whole house now to be retrofitted with hurricane ties. And you can say, well, no, I'm not touching the main house. I'm only doing the addition. And they can tell you, and I've heard this before because they told me that with some of my clients, saying, your house is under one tax key. Once you come in for a building permit, we have a right to inspect and require any retrofit that affects health and safety on the entire property, even if your house is already permitted and is existing. So in other words, they can do that for electrical, plumbing, and hurricane ties. They don't normally do that for plumbing, but I've seen them require electrical, and I've seen them require hurricane retrofit on the existing house. So in answer to the question, yes, but even if it's not required, you should take the proactive approach and do it anyway, because you don't want your new addition to be there after hurricane and the rest of your whole house gets blown away, right? So does that make sense, Martin?
Makes sense. I hope it makes, I'm sure it makes sense to the, to the person who asked the question. And just to let you know, we still, we don't have any other questions, no hands raised, no chat. So I think we're good.
Okay, well, thank you. If anybody has any questions after this webinar regarding hurricane ties, you can call or shoot me an email. Remember, if you have other topics you want covered, we also have on our website on-demand videos of webinars that we previously completed already. And there's a whole list, contractor licensing, I don't know, there's about 8 or 10 of them so far. And also, if you have topics, please let us know. Once again, we appreciate you attending. Thank you very much. Hope you learned something, and we're always here to help. So if you have any questions on other things regarding building, construction, and those kind of topics, feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to try and help you, and hope to see you again at the next webinar. Aloha.